It's a great honour to introduce Gabby. She's based in Newcastle. She's a conservationist and she's a botanist. She's the coordinator of Hunter. Oh, is that okay? Yep, she's the coordinator of Fern Creek Landcare and the Hunter Intrepid Landcare group. And she's, through her intergenerational partnerships and through collaboration and social media, she's really engaged a lot of youth in land care through various projects. So over to you, Gabby. We're looking forward to hearing what you've got to say. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very, very much for having me. Thank you so much for inviting me to talk to your network, particularly given I'm elsewhere in the country. And yeah, just thank you so much for having me. Really grateful to have my work recognised and the value of youth engaging in land care as well. So very thankful for that. I'd like to start by saying that I acknowledge I'm on the traditional lands of the Awabakal people, and they are the lands on which I work and play. I acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded and their ongoing connections. I also pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging, and I extend that respect to any First Nations people who may be joining us today. So, as I said, we'll be talking about engaging youth in land care. I'm going to talk a little bit about who I am, how I got here, because it all relates to land care. I'll talk a bit about Hunter Intrepid and Intrepid Land Care in general. We're also going to talk about intergenerational land care, which is something I've been really focused on in the last few years, particularly with my work with Fern Creek Land Care. We're going to talk a bit about social media, marketing, and using social media. We'll talk a bit about engaging youth skills in land care, which we can apply to your local area, your existing groups, and the network. We're going to talk about the barriers that we're all facing as a young person, as people trying to engage them as well, how we can overcome them. We're going to talk about what next for Wodonga Urban Land Care Network. I've got some advice on that, and then we'll be opening up for a Q&A discussion then. So if you have questions that come up along the way, please save them for the end. As Lizette was saying, write them down perhaps if you forget, like I would, and we'll come back to them at the end of this, because I really hope there's going to be a nice dialogue between us, because I really want to give you catered advice for what can bring the most success in your local area. Okay. Hopefully that slide change work. Okay, a little bit about me. So believe it or not, I'm actually 30. But my face says otherwise. I'm actually a horticulturalist, which is where my love of plants really got refined. I'm a conservationist as well. I've done work with flora, fauna, both native and exotics. I've also worked as an ecology assistant. All of this happened via Landcare, and I've also done botany work. I've also been doing volunteer coordination, mostly voluntary, but through my demonstrated skills and capacities, that's actually led to paid work. So previously, just through my work with Fern Creek Landcare, I was actually taken on as project officer for our regional Landcare network, which is the Hunter Region Landcare Network, which I loved doing. It was fantastic. And now I'm also community engagement officer for a tiny little environmental not-for-profit, a local one called Trees in Newcastle. And all of this leads into how youth can get things out of volunteering for land care. I'm a living, walking example of that. So as Lizette mentioned, my voluntary roles are coordinator of Fern Creek Landcare, and now I'm actually co-coordinator of Hunter Intrepid Landcare, because I found someone else, or she found me rather, to come on as my co-coordinator as well, which just makes it all so much better and fun. This work has really, I won't talk too much about it because it does make me a little bit emotional, but this work has like really saved my life. It really has saved my life. And I'm really passionate about getting young people in, because I think it can give do so much for them as well. And the industry is crying out for us. They need us, and Landcare also needs us as well. But you guys know that. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Hunter Intrepid first. For those of you, I spoke a little bit about it, the youth steering event, but Intrepid Landcare is a national body that identified the gap in Landcare volunteering and Landcare engagement that exists between the cutoff for junior Landcare, which is primary school, sometimes high school, so maximum kind of age 18, and then obviously the retired Landcare group, so 60 plus, which are your typical demographics. So there's a massive group, a massive demographic of people who are keen and fit and interested to get out there in Landcare, and that was the purpose of Intrepid Landcare, was to grab that demographic, which we have had success, but also there have been things that have fallen away, particularly in the last few years with COVID and that, and we're still waiting to see whether that my demographic is going to increase as the trend was showing prior to COVID with their volunteering. But it's really Intrepid Landcare that actually got me into Landcare. I have a list of resources that you can look at after this, but just take a look at the Intrepid Landcare logo. They have such strong branding, such strong colors, and they actually, one of their great things is as you have a chapter, as you establish a new chapter of Intrepid Landcare throughout the country, they support you with things like branding, and they help you design a logo and that sort of stuff. They also provide support with volunteer management, event management, and leadership. So by being part of this greater national body, I've had skills passed on to me and resources passed on to me from Intrepid Landcare, which is fantastic. So Hunter Intrepid Landcare is the Hunter, my local chapter of this. And it's funny, I didn't know anything about them until I found the Central Coast, which is like the neighboring one, which was quite funny. This was actually my very, very first experience of Landcare. So back in 2018, I was invited on a leadership camp on the Central Coast. And at the time, I was just in horticulture, and I was like, oh, yeah, I like natives. Oh, yeah. And then just really, really enjoyed my very first taste of Landcare and how great it could be. And the thing about that was it was all young people, and there was a lot of empowerment in this event because it was a leadership camp. It talked about how you can actually, the point of the leadership camp was to start a new chapter in the Central Coast. And I know that Intrepid's done that all around the country, and I believe that's how Hunter Intrepid started as well. So that was my very first stepping into Landcare, and then immediately after that I started running events because I got excited, and I was very into yoga at the time, and I really wanted to follow the Intrepid Landcare ethos, which is Landcare and. So often it's education, culture, something social, something creative, and Landcare. So for me, it was yoga and Landcare, and it was a really successful event. I had a great time, and I was like, I could get used to this. I could really, really do this, not for a living. It was all just volunteering at the time, but I found it so much fun, and it was a really fantastic way for me to find my passions, which is in natural area restoration and native plants, but also to apply the skills that I already had and help to develop them. So all of the previous skills that I've had in what feel like other lives, like teaching and that sort of thing, I found that this was a really great outlet for those existing skills that I have. And I really think that a lot of other young people, as they take the step up into choosing to run events that they really care about, either they will live with passion, inspiration, more skills, more friends, usually all of those things, to be honest. So I was part of Hunter Intrepid, and I'd run a couple of events, and this was all pre-COVID, but kind of during the bushfires. So if we can remember what it was like back then. And then this is actually how I found Fern Creek Landcare. So it was through, and again, I won't talk about it too much because it does make me quite emotional, but Fern Creek Landcare is it's a typical Landcare group in the Lake Macquarie area. So we're really lucky because we have a very strong local network attached to our council, so not at the regional level, the council level, and the Landcare community and drive in Lake Macquarie, which is my local council area, which is what Fern Creek sits in, is huge. It's a powerhouse. So it was quite easy for me to find a group in an area that I was really connected to. The reason that I went to Fern Creek Landcare in the first place is because it actually maintains an area that means a lot to me, and I spent a lot of time there healing and reconnecting with Australia and myself. And when I started learning about horticulture, I decided I really wanted to give back in a more meaningful way, do something more than just like picking up rubbish. And that is how I reached out to Fern Creek Landcare, had a couple emails with Peter, and he invited me to come along. Now, I'll be honest here, and this is probably a similar story for a lot of young people who may have tried to engage with existing groups. I was really shy. I was so shy to turn up to an existing group. And honestly, I think I had communications with Peter for 6 months before I actually showed up to the group. And I feel a little bit ashamed about that, but I actually think it's a really common thing, particularly with young people. So the thing that actually gave me that little kick that I needed was that there was a collaborative event between Hunter Intrepid Landcare and Fern Creek Landcare. And this was National Tree Day of 2019. Yes, 2019. So I'll talk a bit more about this later, but this event is a really good example of the sort of things that I encourage existing Landcare groups to do. So that's collaborating with a youth group, in this case it was Hunter Intrepid, for a specific task, planting, on a nationally recognised significant day, National Tree Day. As I say, I talk a little bit more about this later, however, but it goes to show it is just true that you get more volunteers when you attach your events to a significant day of conservation. So we have a collaborative event, specific task, big task that needed young people to do, and we have that significant day. So that gave me the guts, I guess, to actually go, because I knew that there was going to be a lot more young people there as well. So purely just because I knew who Intrepid was, had a little bit of experience, and I knew some of the people who were coming, I got the guts to actually show up to this Landcare group in Dudley. So that was my very first experience at Fern Creek Landcare. And on that day, we had, it was over 50 people, and we had a massive group, and we smashed out a huge 750 plants down a steep, eroded bank with jute matting. We smashed out that task in less than 2 hours, which really just goes to show how much you can get done when you have a massive group of people. But also this area really required the flexibility and the sure footing of younger people, particularly in some areas. So they just send us off to smash out a bunch of tubes down there. And Peter, who was he's my predecessor. He is the old fella in the picture with me. He, when we met at that event, he could really see something in me that was had the leadership qualities and also having the skills of the horticulture and plant identification and weed control and that sort of thing. And I was also about to start my diploma of conservation as well. So he identified my existing skills, my interests, and then kind of sunk his claws into me. I'm not going to lie. It was a little bit intimidating, but it was fantastic. It was absolutely fantastic. Sorry, I forgot to change slides here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the intergenerational Landcare now. That it's intergenerational because there's me, I was 25, and there's Peter, he was nearly 80 at the time. So massive, vastly different generations. But we just got along really well. Our personalities are both quite strange, but we had really common interests, and there was a few moments there where it really came into focus for me, and I was like, wow, this he's really got my back here. He really wants to be my mentor. So as intimidating as it was for me, he invited me to be co-coordinator in 2019. And the reason for that is, if you look in this corner here in the picture, we've got a giant check. So we received a grant of $20,000 from our state member from the Stronger Communities grant. Probably means nothing because we're in different states, but that's what we received. And that was to, and as you can imagine, Stronger Communities, it's all about strengthening community. It wasn't an environmental specific grant. It had a lot of other metrics around community engagement as well, which is, I guess, why Peter was so set on young people as well. He's also a really, really special person, and he's been pushing for youth engagement for a really long time because he's always seen the point and the value in that. And he's just an incredible man. So he asked me to come on as co-coordinator, and it was hard and it was tricky, but I put my big shoes on, my big girl pants on, and did it. And it was incredible. And if it weren't for me having the bravery and doing that, we would not have been able to successfully fulfill the grant in time, because obviously December 2019, we had no idea what was coming. But I'm happy to say, I'm very proud to say that we managed to fulfill the grant requirements within 3 months, despite the COVID lockdowns and pandemic, through adaptive management strategies and getting young people involved. So we had at that time, we had a massive downturn of older volunteers, obviously for wanting to stay safe and being risk averse in not wanting to go outside too much. It was entirely through social media. So through Peter's willingness to allow me to implement changes and bring new ideas, I would put the group on social media. Previously, there was only I think it was a closed page or a closed group, and it wasn't functioning how we wanted to. So the very first thing I did was create a public page on our Fern Creek, to create the public Fern Creek Landcare page on Facebook, and then the subsequent Instagram. So those are the two main platforms I'm going to talk about today. And the other thing that Peter was really incredible with, if you look in the middle here, I don't know if any of you have seen our Squirrel Guided documentary, but through social media branding, presence, and the creation of this fantastic video, we put those assets on social media, and it was just kept going and going. Following just kept going and going. Also through a little bit of media attention and the use of a cute and cuddly little fauna mascot, our squirrel glider, which is what the entire project was centered around. We got so much involvement in our Landcare, in Fern Creek Landcare, and I think I grew the existing volunteer group at the time. I tripled it at the time in 2020, and now it's gone up by 500% or so, and that's through the use of social media. So something incredible happens when you start getting young professionals in. And we had a friend of mine turn up. She's a graphic designer, and then she just went boom, and then created this beautiful logo for us, which I couldn't have done. I don't have the skills, but through marketing and that presence online, creating events using online registration and photos and online invitations, all of the things that I can see Wodonga Landcare Network doing, we got in a whole bunch of young professionals, and then they actually came and applied their skills to our Landcare group. Or we asked them to do certain tasks that were within their professional capacity, and it all just added to our Landcare group, which in turn got more and more young people in. So thinking in doing this presentation, reflecting back on the foresight that Peter had, he got me involved as co-coordinator because he knew that we needed young people involved to do this, but he also knew that we needed a young person at the front to be basically the face of this thing, which was hard and difficult for me, but it really does work. So when it comes to, as we'll talk about in a little bit, when it comes to using your social media platforms to get young people in, you need to think about having young people at the forefront as well, because one young person attracts many young people. Okay, so after all of that, everything that went on with the Squirrel Glider project in 2020, we, sorry, excuse me. So as I said, really increased the volunteer pool, and now the average age of volunteer is 30 years or less, which is phenomenal. We get a minimum of 20 volunteers per session, and they're highly skilled because often they are the young professionals, sometimes bush regenerators or people working in the environmental industry, but they want to get back out in the field because they're doing too much desk work. Or we also get skills in other ways like photography, nurses, creatives, and we ask them to apply their skills to our Landcare group as well. And our following just keeps on growing and growing through social media, which is an example of passive recruitment, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And we also have ongoing involvement from seasoned Landcarers, and that really maintains that intergenerational aspect of it. The importance of intergenerational Landcare can basically be surmised through succession. And it's also the exchange of knowledge, and it's a community growing activity, because I think we feel like, for me as a young person, there's been such a lack of guidance and community in those ways, and particularly hanging out with your elders. So when it comes to doing something like Landcare together, it really is enriching to be mentored by existing Landcarers. So it was very successful in our end, and we'll talk a little bit later about how we can implement a mentoring program or think about being open to the process, the possibility of being mentored or mentoring someone else. Excuse me. So it was through my friend Izzy who came in and did that design and basically created a massive brand for Fern Creek Landcare. And primarily that, so the presence on social media in a recognizable brand, the fact that we aligned ourselves with squirrel gliders. I basically became synonymous for squirrel gliders in our local area because we named the project that. And the very important key third thing was that video. That video got us so much attention, and it was Peter who wrote up and planned the grant before he even knew me, but he had the foresight to know how powerful visual documentaries would be for the project, and putting that all over social media. So you can create something through handheld iPhone videography for sure, but if you can, and if you value the importance of it, incorporate into your grant writing and grant structure, budget for video creation or digital asset creation or social media management. I really think that's important, because it's important to get the skills from the professionals. We can do what we can as novices, but if you really want a beautiful product, you got to get the professionals in to help you as well. So that video really just took it away for us. I encourage you to get on our Facebook and have a look at it at some point. It is a couple years old, but yeah, please have a look for us. I wanted to bring your attention to an Instagram that I think is working really well. and how we can look at something with consistent branding and just we always know that it's from the same group. And this is what has really worked for us with Fern Creek Landcare. So through consistent branding, using the same fonts, the same logos and colors, you can have a uniformity of your feed that makes you really recognizable as a brand. And I will say, as as tricky as it is for me to think of Landcare as being a product or a desired commodity, this is basically how we need to interact with it in the online sphere to get the increased engagement that we need, because you're out there competing with brands that are for profit. Everyone's content is going on the same platform, and where there's no discernment between it. So if you want to have your attention drawn to, you need to follow the same principles of marketing, digital marketing, as for-profit brands actually do. And these are just some examples of our consistent branding that was done with the assistance of the graphic designer. And something else that I wanted to talk about is, I was trying to find the document today. If I can find it, I'll send it off to you. But there is a formula to getting success and engagement with Landcare images as well. And what we want to see, what the young people will notice, is smiling, happy young people in your photos. So after a while, I think all habitat and sort of maintenance photos look kind of the same. But people are what little fluffy creatures. So we need to be getting them across our social medias. More photos that did really well on our socials. And of course, branding and logos. Even if you're just putting up a plant picture, I encourage you to put your logo on there just to create that sense of uniformity as well. And a bit of silliness, like this photo, very silly, but people absolutely loved it. We need a bit of silliness, and the internet is a very silly place, and young people love the funny stuff. So we're going to talk a little bit about engaging youth skills in Landcare. This is an image that I created to sort of get something out of my brain when I was talking at the Next Gen conference last year. That was the Intrepid conference. Basically, so I've noticed that you guys do a lot of digital registration, which is absolutely fantastic. I actually had to rejig my entire presentation after I did a deep dive on your social media because you guys are doing so well already. I don't need to take it back to basics with you guys. You can tweak what you've already got going on. And I think that we can make it all that more efficient just through a few little bits and pieces. So I see that you have a really great online presence as is, and you are doing a lot to, post frequently and that sort of thing. So when you're engaging new volunteers and recruiting young people in particular, try to identify what their skills are. So whether they tell you, or something that I like to do because I am very forgetful, through the use of digital data collection and online registrations, I actually gather all of that data. Who's studying what are their interests, who does photography, who is great in graphic design, and then you can invite them to apply those skills to your Landcare cause or whatever it may be. So maybe their skills are in community organizing. They've done that previously, get them to help run the event. Or maybe their skills are in videography, so get them to help create a little video for you. Where within this this diagram can they fit? And basically with that that circle around it is all of these non-Landcare related skills actually encompass Landcare and conservation causes, and they help to build them as well. So before we talk about the barriers young people have, there's just a few positives and negatives I'd like to discuss about both my projects. The positives of, I really hope that we can get an Intrepid Landcare group happening out your local way. And that it really is fantastic because it gives a lot of autonomy and empowerment to young people, and they have full autonomy and say over the sorts of events that they would like to be doing. And I've also noticed a trend away from the sort of adventure activity plus land care. People are still doing it, but it's really shifted more into education and land care. So more about guest speakers, bio blitzes, walks and talks, and those sorts of engagement and environmental education style events plus land care, which I know which can be really good for things that are very risky and dangerous to be doing, which is I know a lot of people associate with intrepid land care. Some people do rock climbing or abseiling or that sort of thing. Those risks and insurances can be managed through the hiring of like a professional facilitator or a professional instructor, which is what I've done previously for things like kayaking. But there has been a real shift towards education and creative pursuits with land care in intrepid events. So if there are any standouts from the previous youth steering events and the plantathon that you did, please send them my way and we can talk about Intrepid, creating an Intrepid chapter down there. And I also encourage you to look at some of the existing groups, particularly in Victoria, like NEM and Mornington Peninsula and Upper Goulburn, Intrepid Landcare. They're all doing really fantastic things, and they might be able to provide some guidance for running Intrepid Landcare within Victoria State. Sorry, I didn't talk about my other project, did I? So there are positives to, obviously, all the wonderful positives to Intrepid Landcare, but there are definitely negatives as well. So I remember being at the conference, the National Landcare Conference last year, and there was definitely a feeling of us versus them for traditional landcarers and then the Intrepid crew. So I think that often comes down to the attitudes of individuals, but by creating something different, it can, I guess, cultivate a bit of a fissure in the community and differences rather than commonalities. But there are really great things to Intrepid as well. Now, with intergenerational landcare, which is where I'd really like to steer some members of your landcare network to, because it is so fantastic. One of the barriers that Intrepid could bring up for young people is that it's quite overwhelming to be head of something new or design something from the ground up, or find a project and then see it out to the end. It can be overwhelming, and thank you. It can be overwhelming. So that is actually taken away when you have an existing landcare group that's just inviting young people in to join in on the cause. So that was one of the things I loved about coming on as co-coordinator for Fern Creek Landcare, was that there was a project in motion, there was a plan, there was an existing group of volunteers, and we had a site, and we actually had 20 grand. So all those things considered, it made it much less daunting for me to step up into the role that I was asked to do. So those things are really great for youth involvement. Now, let's talk a little bit about the barriers for volunteering, youth volunteering in particular, overcoming them and the trends that we see. So in my research, I found that Gen Z and Millennial, we really do care about the environment. We really, really do. But there are some serious barriers to engaging with these causes. One of them, arguably the biggest one, is the cost of living crisis. I've noticed even just in the last year and a half, a significant downturn of people who are willing to volunteer because they are maybe working an additional shift when we might be doing land care, to try and keep in front of everything that's been going on, or people are unwilling to travel because of the cost of fuel. It's a real issue that prevents young people from being involved. So where you can, where those where those barriers are manageable and identified, do what you can to overcome them, whether it's just offering someone a lift or providing snacks and food after, because these really are preventing people from coming along as well. So Gen Zs and millennials are deeply worried about the state of the earth, particularly the state of environment, but we really are struggling to balance our desire to effect change and the demands of our everyday life, maintaining study, work, and just getting by. So we need to be empathetic to those sorts of things. All of those factors have led to a trend of young people mostly volunteering episodically in kind of one-off sort of events or cases, or just really not being interested in committing to something ongoingly, which is why things like collaborative events and bigger one-off significant conservation days help to bring in a bunch of young people. And through some, mentoring, other offering them other things, hopefully we can achieve an ongoing rather than episodic volunteering of young people. So I think it's about encouraging them to do things ongoingly, but through empowerment and design, and helping them to put into practice what they care about, offering mentorship, work experience, helping them to develop their skills, but also it's about not denying that this is the trend of volunteering in young people. So it's about creating the sort of opportunity, the volunteering opportunity that they're after. So maybe just being okay with the fact that we'll have a really big day this term and there'll be lots of young people, and then maybe ongoingly that there'll be less, but you're still engaging youth in the ways that they are open to being engaged with. I think it's really important to identify people's skills and their potential, and through doing that you can actually on an individual basis kind of nurture those things, hopefully through mentoring. Just some of my personal experience as well. So I've interacted with Landcare at a local, regional, state and national level. There have been barriers at every single level to my ongoing involvement. We have people who actually don't want young people involved, and I've been really discouraged from doing that. And there's also been a lack of prioritizing of it, which is why I'm so grateful that you are putting on this event, because you recognize that it is a priority. There's been a significant lack of funding and I guess just value placed on young people. We feel continuously left out of the conversation, unfortunately. So keeping all of that in mind when you do go to engage with young people. And this little piece of advice as well, which we talk about what we're going to do next, is personal invitations. So I'd really like to see, we respond really well to personal invitations, and this is something that we'll call active recruitment. We'll talk a bit about active v passive in the next section, but if you know a young person who has a bit of that sparkle, who shows a bit of keen interest, invite them personally, get them to bring a friend. And it's also about providing that opportunity, offering leadership and involvement, but not too much, not overdoing it, because it can lead to burnout, which is something I have experienced as well by taking on too much as a volunteer. And as I said, the young people are quite commitment adverse, so not expecting that. Make it a shorter commitment, maybe 3 months, maybe 3 sessions, something like that, working with what the tendencies and trends are rather than against them. All right, so I've had a bit of a think about what's next for Wodonga Urban Landcare Network. I'm going to be a little bit cheeky here. Get Instagram. You need to get Instagram. I think that your Facebook is really fantastic, and just to offer a little caveat of advice, little piece of advice, that's just come out in the last couple of weeks really is that young people we're moving away from Facebook now. We really are. And that's okay. All of these platforms go through various trends and fashions, but something that's happening in my circles and other young people I know is Facebook was used a lot for spreading certain kinds of information in the last month or so, and that has really soured our experience of it as well. I still use Facebook, and there's still so much benefit to using it, and particularly the event function, sharing, tagging other pages as well, fantastic. But I really, really implore, get an Instagram. And you might be like, that's twice as much work for me, but it's not. We actually use it the way, because Instagram and Facebook are linked for both of my Landcare projects and other projects I'm involved with. You actually you post via Instagram and it shares it automatically to Facebook. So Instagram is where you're going to find the people at the moment. And then there's also TikTok, but we're not even going to talk about TikTok tonight, except that it's turned into, we are very interested in videos, which really just hammers home the importance of videos as well. So a couple of things that I've noticed, even just since doing this myself in the last few years, is that shift away from Facebook a little bit. Still go for it, still put lots of content and stuff on Facebook. As I said, keep going with what you're doing, it's great. But tweak it a little bit. Oh, okay, 10 minutes. Alrighty. So we're going to get on Instagram and utilize it for passive engagement. And through doing that, through having a ongoing presence on these different platforms, you actually continually gather more and more people. So that's an example of passive engagement. And then through the contacts that you've hopefully listed from that previous youth engagement event and the Plantathon, hopefully you can get in and actively recruit some people as well to invite them along to specific events, give them a taste, and then we can work on that ongoing relationship and engagement to get them to bring a friend and allow them to really give you guidance for social media as well. Okay, I think it's probably worth stopping and going to questions.
I'll just interject there. Thanks so much for that, Gabby. You've really shared so much of your experiences, and you've done your homework on us, and you've come up with some really targeted suggestions. Can I start off with a quick question? Obviously, Fern Creek Landcare is a wonderful example of intergenerational landcare. You've listed some other places where intrepid landcare exists.
Yep.
Are there other examples that you can guide us to of intergenerational landcare?
Honestly, not heaps, because I think it's something that's only just sort of establishing now. But I think it's also, you need to think, what was the project you were talking to me about with the primary school kids joining in on an existing group? That is an example of intergenerational landcare. If a mother or father brings along their kid to a planting day, that's intergenerational landcare as well. I think really what makes it work in an ongoing way is the existing group willing to be flexible and shift for the needs of and the priorities of the other generation, which is what Peter was really fantastic at. So he didn't dig his heels in at all. He gave me a lot of freedom, and that's why I was able to do what I did.
Okay, let's open to other questions. Bearing in mind, it's been a great presentation, but has gone longer than originally planned. So we've got about 10 minutes for questions. Anyone else got a question? Just unmute yourself and please call out.
I do. Thanks, Lizette and Gabby. We're often told that young people particularly hate meetings and that's a big barrier. Can you comment on, did Fern Creek Landcare modify the way that they did meetings once they got more youth membership? Or how did you find that?
Yeah, so I guess the first example that comes up, one of the first things that Fern Creek Landcare did was we No shade to anyone at all. I love tea. I'm drinking my tea now, but we shifted away from the cup of tea after and the debriefed, and we went and changed instead to a beer at the pub down the road. And then we also did that for our meetings, but we've done. And sorry, I forgot to mention this. Meetings really are a pain in the butt for young people. You're not going to get us on as a committee member for something we don't like, a cause that we're not already invested in. So by avoiding things like incorporation and relying heavily on our regional network and local network, local Landcare network, we have been able to avoid having committees and everything that comes with that. So we're actually not an incorporated group. We don't have a committee for either. We've got leadership committees for Hunter Intrepid, which are the coordinating members and people who are interested. But Fern Creek Landcare, no, we don't actually have a committee or a chair because all those things are deterrents.
Nice question, Jill. Anyone else got a question?
Yes, I have.
Thanks, Jeanette. Fire away.
I was wondering about the intergenerational Landcare. What day of the week did you hold it?
So that was always on a Saturday morning. And that is one of the very first formulae things is that I talk about with intergenerational Landcare and getting young people involved in general is it has to be fitting within our schedules. So whether or not it's an evening webinar, that's fine. But those on-ground sessions need to be available on the weekends, which I know is difficult for some people and may involve some flexibility, but maybe even just a one-off or occasional one that you do on the weekend, and you do all the things that I mentioned, that online presence, online registration, and provide education opportunities and invite young people. That way you can still get them in. It's a nice balance is what I'm getting at. But yeah, weekends are definitely the way to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was thinking the weekend would be better. Thanks.
But yeah, like if your Landcare group meets on a Wednesday regularly, that's fine. But maybe you hold a once every 3 months a larger weekend event that you really promote and try to get young people in.
Terrific, thank you.
No worries.
Anyone
Gary,
else?
I've got a question, if that's okay. Gabby, as staff, we work flexibly from home, the project officers, myself as the facilitator, and we quite often get requests for work experience or for that mentoring sort of opportunity, which I find can be really challenging at the network level to support because we do all work flexibly and from home. It sounds to me like you found that experience through actually joining a group and getting involved and taking on that leadership role, which then led to career opportunities for you. Is that, I mean, if we're going to provide advice to young people when they come to us, is that something you would say, join a group and try and get involved in that way?
Definitely. I think that the focus on employment and employment opportunities and skills comes back to the cost of living crisis primarily. And yeah, so this is something I would want us to talk more directly with the network about, and that's providing formalized job experience or recognition of their time or volunteer efforts. Also, you could create little mini internships of you run our social media for 3 months and we'll give you a certificate or something, because all those things add to their skills and also their employability, particularly if what they want is in the enviro industry, but it's applicable to whatever they want to do. So I guess it's recognizing their skills, allowing them to apply them to your cause or your network, and then recognizing them formally. There's also the option to gamify through, number of plants they recognize or number of hours they've put in. So this sort of, because that is very interesting for young people, this gamification. We've seen that across multiple things. Sorry, the other thing I wanted to mention is that I understand and I empathize, and I was in the same position when I was with my regional Landcare network. There wasn't money there to be putting towards these causes like mentoring. I anticipate that in the new round of funding, hopefully with the NLP or just local government grants, that you can find something that similar to strengthening communities or technology or something. Think outside the box there, getting young people involved, climate change, anxiety, some wellness, something like that, that you can look to pay you for your time to set these things up, because you definitely need to be reimbursed for the amount of time that would go into creating and establishing a mentoring program. But if you run like an on-ground group, this is something you can do, something like that, very, very small, without too much effort and hours, I hope.
Awesome ideas. Thanks, Gabby.
Gabby, do you think we could just stop screen sharing so we can
Oh.
see everybody's faces?
Oh,
and
certainly.
then that'd be good. And then I can see if there's anyone else with questions. Yay, there we go.
Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. Anyone else have a question? Yeah, Jude. You'll need to unmute.
One of the things that interested me was, with Intrepid is exciting, more dangerous type of, adventurous type activities. Could you just mention some of that? Are any of the Landcares doing that? And probably one of the things with that is, how does the Landcare manage the risks if you're doing weed clearing in hills, or clearing out weeds or rubbish along the river, or those sort of activities that aren't your normal Landcare?
Yeah, absolutely.
More
So
exciting stuff.
the way that we actually navigate the issues of insurances and safety with Intrepid Landcare is we either have, for example, kayaking or climbing or something like that, we use a qualified instructor to facilitate the event, and then usually they have all their insurances with them and the equipment. We've done that. That's how it worked for us with a kayaking event that I did with rubbish removal and mangroves. So as I also mentioned, there has been a bit of a shift away from the adventure style Landcare and with Intrepid into the more community education side, and bio blitzes and citizen science. So if you really are risk adverse in that way, do something less risky, like paint by botanical sketching or photography or painting or something like that. But if there are areas that benefit more, areas and causes that benefit more adventure style land caring as well, and that definitely appeals to some younger people too. So I would engage with qualified instructors and facilitators, and see how we can rely on the network to support the other public liability insurances and such. And I also usually get a representative we often do a lot of work on parks, so I usually get my colleague from parks to come out and do the safety induction so that all of those boxes have been ticked.
Time for one last question. It's 1 minute to 7.
I've got one last one for you, Gabby.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you've looked at the chat, but Jude mentioned that we had an Albury Wodonga Intrepid group that started, and I think during COVID struggled to sort of sustain itself.
Yep.
Any tips for how we can engage with them or maybe get them back up and running again?
Yeah, I think Lizette mentioned that you couldn't get in touch with whoever organised that previously.
Yeah.
If you can't get in touch with that person, I don't really know what you can do there other than get in touch with Intrepid, the national body, and see if they can reach out to them. I really, really recommend gathering and personally inviting some of the people from your previous youth events that showed, because they came out with planting. It could have been something not as environmental as that, or Landcare adjacent as that. So I would encourage, do a bit of puppeteering, call them on the phone, people that show a lot of promise from that group, from those events that you did, and see if you can sort of get them to do a bit of Intrepid looking at and see whether they can get inspired in that way. And you can put them in touch with me if you'd like as well. So unfortunately, I don't know what to do regarding the existing group. But yeah, hopefully that may actually be a positive, because you may get young people in and say, this is actually an existing group, and so the work required to getting it off the ground is actually minimal. And then I was also thinking, additionally, next year you can have a formalized calendar every few months, have an existing Landcare group collabs with Albury Wodonga Intrepid Landcare. So get more people, new blood. Hopefully those people will be able to take on leadership responsibilities, which will be minimal, for that Intrepid Landcare group as well. Does that make sense?
Yep, excellent. Thank you.
Gee, Gabby, you've given us so much food for thought. Thank you very much. You've piqued our interest and hopefully given us ideas how we can proceed. And as I said, thank you for having looked into where we can start. I don't know if you noticed that we do actually have a YouTube page. So we might not have an Instagram, but we have YouTube, and that is where this recording will go, and it will be a really useful resource for people who missed out. And I did get some apologies for people who could not make it, but we're keen to see the link. So thank you again to Karen. Thank you all for coming. The biggest thank you, of course, to Gabby, and we'll see you another time. Bye.
Thank you all so much.
Massive thank you, Gabby. It was great.